Well, greetings to the Narkis Street community, the Bible study, weekly Bible study. I'm leading it. My name is Gerrish. Everybody calls me Yoni. That's a nickname that's been going on for almost 40 years now. And we have been working through Luke's gospel and focusing on a number of things, Hebrewisms, little nuggets, and we're, obviously comparing the synoptic three when they can be compared with a story that's in tandem. So I will be ping-ponging back and forth between Luke, Mark, and Matthew a little bit, but at least right at first, my focus will be on Luke, and we'll just get started. But first, thank you, God. Pater Hemon, thank you, Lord. Avinu b'shamayim, yikadesh shemcha. Thank you, God, for all that you do for us, for the miracles, the little ways that you take care of us, how you provide for our families, our children, and during this time of quarantine that and international epidemic with this COVID, I pray that you can call people out to make a difference and shed your light in this world. Amen. So in the Narkis tradition, we put a lot of emphasis on Luke, and there's a lot of reasons, a lot of good reasons to do that. For people on the outside, this is kind of a strange approach, perhaps, but there's just a lot of delightful things in this week's text, and it's the sort of thing that I personally get really excited about because I enjoy the historical geography side as much as anything, as much as the textual side. So I'm looking for little ways that I might be able to draw attention to something unique in the landscapes of these texts. And there is a lot to think about. As an aside, I have been droning a lot. And Lois knows a bit. I've been droning certain archaeological sites. The topography, the lay of the land is really important to me because that often helps put the puzzle together. Oh, they came down this slope, they attacked here. Naturally they would because that's a flat spot, or here's the creek, or there's the well. Oh, this all makes sense. From the air, it's just so different. And I'm a real enthusiast for the drone. And I've flown over a couple places I might get in trouble for because I'm registered. But Keith, you might find this amusing. I flew over the wadi so that the Nachal between, today in Arabic is called Mukmas and Geva Ben Yamin. So the Arab town Mukmas, which is ancient Mishmash, and Geva Ben Yamin, which there is a Jewish settlement, and there's this wadi. And I flew over a fence, and I started getting warnings right away that I'm either too high or I'm approaching an area I shouldn't fly, and they can actually shut you down and come after you because I'm registered. Anyway, it's one of my best pieces of footage, and you can appreciate Jonathan and his armor bearer going up this wadi. Well, today's subject is the calming of the storm on the lake, the Kinneret, Sea of Galilee, and then the ensuing part where they go to the Decapolis, and Jesus deals with this man who's been plagued with a legion of demons. And I have droned all over the east side, but I haven't droned over the newer archaeology starting in 2015. So I'm actually going to put some photos up. I'm going to share my screen, put some photos up of a couple of things, and just keep in mind, this is new archaeology. It's new to me. I haven't really gone and gotten my feet into it yet, but I want to deal with this part before we actually read the story. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to bring up a rather old picture of Mendel Noon. And I was really hoping that I have some family members in Virginia Beach. I was hoping they would tune in to this particular Bible study. because they have met Mendel Noon back in the 90s. He died in 2010. But I would, as often as possible, I would visit him in his little museum at Engev. I'm sure that some of you, Lois, I don't know, Jim, if you've gone, Richard, you may have gone to visit Mendel, you know, back in the 70s, back in the day with David Biven and company. He was always a very interesting person, and much more than a fisherman. He really had an eye for archaeology. He may not have been an expert in archaeology, but he knew how to sort of suss out where some settlement might be. He had a knack. And he was also a fisherman. Fishermen have a knack of knowing when to fish, how to fish, gauged on the weather, time of day, water temperature. Some of you may not know this, but I grew up fishing in the US, both lakes and rivers, both in Colorado and Arkansas. So I have tools, sort of a trade, a skill. I know how to read the water in a way, especially on certain rivers. I could always tell, oh, around this next bend, if there's a log falling into the water, I know which side of that log I'm going to fish on, according to the current and so forth. Mendel Noon makes several observations about pockets where you might expect to catch more fish, certain kinds of fish, certain times of day. He could read the lake. He could read the Kinneret. So his opinion about not only fishing spots, but where there would be settlements, I think is really vital. So he would be one of the most important authorities on locating fishing villages around the lake. So I've got an old map. This is from, actually this map may be from maybe the late 70s. It wasn't published until the 80s, but the map itself may be a bit older, 1989. And can you all see Gergesa on the right side there? What if I zoom in a bit? Wadi Samak, Kursi, Gergesa, and I've penciled in something there called Avanish, which is a bit of a mystery. And I even spoke to David Biven about this, so we're gonna try to hunt this one down. I haven't personally found this, but Mendel Noon mentions a little town called Avanish right next to Gergesa, Kursi, Garissa. We'll try to sort out the names. There's a lot of different names involved here. But Wadi Samak, which means fish in Arabic, also in well, it may be Old Aramaic. I need to look that up. But Samak means fish. So it's the Nahal coming off the Golan, and it's got the name fish. Well, he said there was a town called Avanish on the south bank of Samak River or stream, right? Well, it's just around the corner from Gergesa, which has its own little harbor and a little village, a little tell. And later on, of course, we're going to have a Byzantine period settlement there, a little monastic order, a couple of churches, a little chapel, and then a larger church. Brian Baruch Kvasnik also helped to excavate one year some of the bathhouse for that particular Byzantine site. Do you all know what I'm talking about? It's a national park, so all of you have been here. So Avanish apparently was around the corner at this Nahal Samak, and it's mostly Jewish. In fact, it may be entirely Jewish. This is the part that really caught my ears. I think traditionally, historically, when we talk about the East Side, most people automatically start thinking about, oh, it's the Decapolis. It's mostly Greek and Roman. It's mostly Gentile. Not too many Jews over there, say, south of Gamla. We know Gamla was heavily Jewish, but south of Gamla, maybe not so many. I've had to rearrange my whole thinking on this. I think there's a smattering of Jews all over the lake, especially on the northwest shoreline, the Galilee side, that's clear. But on the east side, apparently there's more of the Jewish community there than I was just not aware of it. So Avanish, haven't hunted this down. I don't have all the details, but it's a little Jewish village on the lake. It's around the corner from Gerrish, which may be the place where Jesus and company land, and we have the demoniac story. So I'm gonna zoom back out just a little bit. I'm gonna go to the next photo. This photo is really just a Google. I just went to Google. This is not from my drone. I haven't droned this part of the beach yet, so I apologize. The quality isn't so great. So we're zooming in from outer space here. And in 2015, they started doing little excavations along the shoreline. They've got two sections, Shetach A and Shetach B. In Shetach A, they found part of a breakwater for a harbor. There's a little tower. I'm actually just as interested in the tower as I am almost anything else, because towers usually mean some kind of settlement. Towers are important. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, go to the next picture. Here we have, and this is not mine either. I've just taken this from the online site from the 2015 excavation. So we have a little breakwater. Can you all see my cursor? All right, so there's a breakwater. There's some kind of a tower in here. I need to go and look at this now that they've excavated a bit more. But just to give you an idea, this is what the breakwater looked like in the 2015 excavation. It is significant. That's not a small little wall. That's a serious wall. It's pretty long too. That surprised almost everyone, how deep the foundation for this breakwater goes. Very, very significant. Another photo of the same area, Shetach A, and this is where Mendel Noon, early on, maybe in the 70s, he suspected there was a synagogue right here.
Yoni, this is Kersey still. We're still in Kersey,
We're still in Kersey.
Okay, sorry.
Kersey / Gerrish. All right, we're still at Kersey or Kursi. By the way, Kursi is another name that really needs to be chased down more than I have for sure. It's Arabic for chair, like kursa, but it's also apparently a Semitic word, maybe Hebrew usage a couple thousand years ago, because the word kursi or kursa does show up in the Talmud and the Midrash. It's very, very interesting. I'm not going to pretend I know all about that word. So I'm just saying, rough survey, Kursi, Gerrish, maybe one in the same place.
I think Arabic gets it from Aramaic, actually.
Well, yeah, they share. And by the way, since you're on, samak is the modern Arabic for fish, but I think it's also Aramaic. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think Arabic also, I think it's also not an Arabic root. I think it's also borrowed.
It's borrowed.
Arabic. Yeah.
All right. Well, this is the place to borrow words right here. So this is part of a piece of marble at the synagogue at Kursi, Gerrish, and you can already read it. You can already see the letters just as they were uncovering it. It's quite a fantastic discovery. And here's the text of it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Just that it starts out. You can see Letov Ulebracha. You can see it's partly Hebrew, it's partly Aramaic. Tiberia is mentioned, Tiberius. It ends with Amen, the word Amen. It's pretty nice. So likely a dedicatory kind of inscription, could be a synagogue. It has all the right feel for a synagogue, the inscription. Really fascinating. Now, I'm back to Google, and we're zooming out a little bit so you can still see area A, area B. Area B, by the way, is where the synagogue is located. And I'm going to zoom out
All
just
this
a
was
little bit more.
discovered. All this was discovered just in 2015.
2015. And to be honest, I don't know what's happened since 2015. It was a write-up in 2017, but I don't know that they have gone back to excavate further. So we're zooming out. Reason for zooming out is just to get perspective. This is still Google. I'm just pulling out Google Earth and taking photos as I'm pulling out. And then we can see basically the whole lake. So our story that we're dealing with, we're just going to start in Luke 8, verse 22 in just a moment. We're definitely starting the story on the northwest shoreline, which is often called the Galilee side. It's definitely the hub for the Jewish community, more Jewish residents on the northwest shoreline than other parts of the lake. This is the Capernaum side, Bethsaida, Guinesseries, which may be a corruption of Kinneret in the first place. Migdal, right there. So they start out on the northwest side, and Jesus said, let's go over to the other side. So, well, he does say that in, I think, all three Gospels. He says, let's go to the other side. All right, so I'm starting in Luke 8, and I'll go ahead and close. Or should I just leave the screen up?
Leave the picture. It's great. Because you're going to go across from, wait a minute, from there, Guinesseries.
Well, I don't know about Guinesseries precisely, but somewhere over here.
It's somewhere around here, across there, here.
Right. So we're going to cross over. Now, all of you know the lake is kind of roundish, and every side is the other side, especially when you're in a boat just barely offshore. Every side's the other side. So it's not always easy to figure out where they're going. But in this case, we do get a couple of hints. One is in Luke. The other one is in Mark, when he lets us know it's the Decapolis. All right, so the whole eastern side is part of the Decapolis, and yet there's a mix of Jews living over there. I guess that shouldn't have surprised me, but perhaps all my life I heard that one side was Gentile, the other side was Jewish. You know, I just always heard that, and it's just not true.
So you suggest they left somewhere from the area where the Jordan comes into the Sea of Galilee?
Yeah, I don't know if it's precisely on the north end, the Bethsaida shoreline. Capernaum is about right here. Let me zoom in just a little bit. Capernaum, Guinesseries, Tabcha, you know, any one of these ports, because we're not told exactly where he was. So they cross over to the other side. So I'm just reading from Luke 8, and I'm going to read. Can you all still see that map? Do you all still see the map? Okay. I'm reading from Luke 8, starting verse 22, and I'm reading just from sort of a literal translation. And it came to pass on one of the days, so it's just a pretty casual beginning. On one of those days, he himself went into a boat with his disciples and said to them, let's go over to the other side of the lake. So they set out. And as they were sailing, he fell deeply asleep, and there came down a storm of wind to the lake, and they were filling and were in peril. And having come near, they woke him, saying, Master, Master, we're perishing. And he, having arisen, rebuked the wind and the raging of the water, and they ceased, and there was a calm. And he said to them, "Where's your faith?" And they were afraid, and they wondered, and they said to each other, "Who is this then, that even the winds, that he commands the winds and the water, and they obey him?" All right, that's just, don't worry about that translation. I'm going to get a little more technical with it. First thing we do is we typically, for these Bible studies, we look for Hebrewisms, and that can be something really subtle. It can be complex. I am not really very good at finding these, but there's a few here that were really easy. And so we'll just start with, you know, it's sort of like Hayu Haya beginning, and it came to pass then on one of the days, he also entered a boat, and he said to them, and they launched out, and having come to him, and having arisen, and he rebuking, and the raging on the water, and they ceased, and there was a calm, and he said to them, where is your faith? There's way too many ands in there. K can be and or but, it's a conjunction, but there's way too many. So right off the bat, we've got evidence of Hebrew or Semitic language, you know. And Luke tells us right in the beginning of his work that he's dealing with source material. So that's one of our great clues. When he tells Theophilus, hey, I'm giving you the story, and these are, you know, it's from these records, it's from these sources. We know he's got some kind of source material that he's working with, and it could be in Hebrew, it could be already a translated version. There's maybe a corpus of material that he's working with. I really don't know. That's not for me to sort out. Bob Lindsay had lots of theories about how the early sources sort of came to be, that they get translated, they get refined, they get more refined, and then I don't know. All I know is there's way too many ands in there for Greek, but it's totally fine in English, or in Hebrew, sorry. So that was the first thing. How we doing so far? Everybody okay? Okay. I also like kateve lelafs, and a storm came down. Well, I know the terrain. I think all of you that have been here, you know the terrain. Pretty much on all sides of the lake, there are mountains, there are ridges, there's hills, but there's some particularly steep parts, and the weather patterns often do just kind of surge down onto the lake, especially from the west and the northwest. Even if they come in from the south, they still have to swoop down. The lake is already, you know, a couple hundred meters below sea level anyway. It's already in a big depression. So that little thing caught my attention. It wasn't in the other synoptics. So the storms come down, and that's exactly true to reality. I also want to just back up a bit and mention that Luke is calling it a lake, limnain in Greek. He's not calling it thalassa, which Mark does constantly. I don't think Mark ever uses the word limnain. Matthew is kind of hit or miss. He tends to follow Mark most of the time. But in Luke, he never calls it thalassa, which would be a sea. He always calls it a lake, limnain. Now, some of you have probably pondered this point, thought about it quite a bit. I'm not going to make a huge dent in the scholarly world here or anything like that, but I know it's a lake. Most of you know it's a lake. It's a freshwater lake. We don't call a freshwater lake a sea. You can in Hebrew, because yam could be a really big pond. It could be saltwater, freshwater. It doesn't matter. Yam Suf, you know, down in Egypt, maybe slightly brackish. Doesn't matter. Big body of water. We're just going to call it yam, even if it's shallow. Doesn't matter. but I know that it's a lake. As a matter of fact, it's really just a very wide spot in the Jordan River. And as a matter of fact, as a tour guide, I think that's one of my favorite things to say to people and watch their eyebrows go up. Like, what? It's just the river?
So, would you say that that is in Hebrewism too? The fact that there's unclarity about lake or sea, because there's just one word, yam, which is normally used for such a description?
It easily could be, and yeah, we should just put that up on the shelf and keep it there, because that is a very likely scenario. However, I'm also going to make the point that when Mark is dealing with such stories, he may be intentionally using the word thalassa to create a mood for his stories.
So what is, just be clear again, what's the Greek word that Mark uses? Is that lake or sea?
He always uses sea, thalassa.
Thalassa.
And now here in Luke, I've got lake. Is that a different word in Greek?
Yes, limnain, limnain.
Linnain.
Yes. Limnain.
And could the concept of sea in Luke also be attributed to the fact that the change of weather could be sudden there, and there could flare up a storm out of nowhere, and that is a character more of a sea as a lake?
No, not sure. Yeah, perhaps. For now, just know that Luke always calls it lake and Mark always calls it sea. And it could, in fact, if you follow Steve Notley, if you've read any articles in the Sacred Bridge, and there's some great material in there, he really pushes the notion that the words Sea of Galilee is in fact an early sort of Christian push. Pardon?
Toponym.
Toponym, right. That it's because nobody else uses it that way prior. So if you read the Hebrew Bible, it's always Kinneret, it's always Yam. If you read Josephus, he always calls it
Lake.
a lake, Limnain. The lake of Guinesseries, I think, is the way Josephus describes it.
Tiberius.
No, he says Guinesseries, Ginosar, Josephus. I'll pull up the quote here. Josephus Wars 2, second book, 573. Lake of Gennesaret, Genesar. Ten limnen Genesar. But again, Gennesaret might be a corruption of Kinneret. So in one sense, he may just be using a Hellenized version of the word Kinneret. Some people also make the argument that Genesar is Hebrew, the gardens of the prince. So that's a possibility. I'm not going to be able to sort that one out. I just know that Josephus calls it the lake of Gennesaret, could be Kinneret, but he doesn't call it Sea of Galilee. So we only have the expression Sea of Galilee starting from the New Testament and onwards. And it may in fact be Mark who's doing this. This is another little side point that I want to just throw out before we get too terribly far with this. Someday, and I was kind of hoping Jordash or Joe would tune in. Someday, I'm hoping, and maybe they've already done this, to do statistical analysis of the actual number of Greek words in each pericope. So if there's a story where Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell the same thing, count the Greek words. Just do a word count when they're all three in tandem. Or when it's just Mark and Luke, telling the same story. Matthew doesn't have it. You count those Greek words. So just to give you a little idea how this makes it even more interesting. I don't know what this means. But in the calming of the storm, Luke uses 94 Greek words. Mark has 118. The jury is out on Matthew because it's hard to know when to start this story with Matthew. You have to back up Matthew 8, starting at least verse 16, and then there's two other stories that sort of, they make intrusions into the narrative. So it's hard to know exactly where to start counting in Matthew. So I'll leave that. But between Mark and Luke, the calming of the storm, if shorter means older, then Luke is winning against Mark more than 60% of the time in all the Gospels. It's a number, I think, that means something. But again, I don't know. I don't know what it means. I just think it means something. I think early on, Lindsay thought maybe that that Mark actually had a copy of Luke sitting in front of him. And I think they've thrown that out now. I think they say these two guys write separately from each other, but they have the same corpus of material, Q or whatever you want to call it. That they don't know each other. They're not looking at each other's work. So they're writing separately from each other. And that's kind of the consensus now. But if shorter means older, Luke is actually winning this race. The race between Luke and Matthew is a little tighter, but Mark is losing. So if shorter is older, wow, we've got to figure out a new way to describe this thing. Anyhow, so the calming of the storm. And I just noticed a couple of other things as I was going down through this. When the disciples wake Jesus up, they say, Master, Master. It's repeated. Epistata, epistata. In Mark, it's didaskale, teacher, and he only uses it one time. I don't know, this is just my own interpretation, but if you're in a storm and water's coming into your boat and your teacher, your master, the guy who's got you out there in the first place, it seems like you'd be, to repeat it, Master, Master seems very real to the story to me. It seems like the authentic moment. Whereas teacher, don't you care if we drown? I don't know, it seems a little more controlled. That's just my opinion. It seems like that's harnessed a bit. Whereas Luke's telling of this sounds like the exact moment. Oh, Master, Master, we are perishing. Not, don't you care if we drown? We're going down. Master, Master, that seems real to me. And there were a couple of other things about Luke that seemed very real to the moment. He wakes up, he rebukes the wind and the raging waves, and he says to them, where is your faith? Here, I'm going to shift gears a bit. When he says, where is your faith? It's verse 25. He said to them, Pue pistas aimon, where is the faith of yours? Epho emunah, maybe, something like that. The next word caught my attention, and maybe Gary, you might want to chime in here a bit. Phobethentes. Phobethentes from phobia, fear, and it's an aorist passive participle, something like having been afraid. I didn't do so well in Greek, so when I got to the aorist tenses, I always got a little bit lost and confused. Second declension nouns, aorist tense, and that sort of thing, always. So having been afraid, then they marveled, saying to Echad Leshani, to one another, who is this then that even the winds and, and he commands the water and they obey him.
This is where you need Jordash, because this is what he wrote his dissertation on, the fear.
The fear. So the response up. So
Yeah.
this is up Jordash's alley, and I'm not worthy to untie Jordash's sandals. So if he pipes in at some point, that'll be awesome. But I'm of the opinion, and I'm willing to be wrong, but when he says, "Where's your faith?" Come on, guys, where's your faith? It seems like their fear has also been calmed, having been afraid. Correct me if I'm wrong. Then they marveled. Wow. All right. Saying to one another, who is this that even the winds and waves obey him, type of thing. Mark, when he tells this exact same moment, he has the disciples almost impaled with fear. Fear is even a doublet in Mark's account. So if you're reading Mark 4 from verse 35, you get to, where is it? Having said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you no faith?" And they were filled with fear. It's like, and the fear is really full of fear inside them. And you almost get the impression that Mark, he wants to maintain this fearful aspect a bit, and he's going to play with that. Because, in Mark's gospel, quite often the disciples never quite get there. They don't quite understand. Their hearts are hardened. They don't understand the miracle. They're still in a state of fear, where in Luke's account, they were afraid, having been afraid, but then they marveled. So that sounds more realistic to me. The storm is over, they're calm. Oh my gosh, they were afraid. And now they can move on and think about, wow, that was really amazing. So it's a very different mood between Mark and Luke here. And those are just a couple of things I noticed. I also...
Yoni, can I share something which is in that link? Can I say something?
Yes.
Because what struck me when I was reading it before, and in fact reading all the Gospels recently, is this extraordinary word rebuke. Here is a guy. He rebukes evil spirits. He rebukes this. He rebukes that. They come out without a word, or they come out and they deal with it. And now, they know that, and they've experienced that. And now suddenly he's using this same, "Hey guys, this wind is enough. Stop it." A rebuke you can't come back on a rebuke. It's not like, having an argument. He's just saying, and here, so they're marvel and they're scared. It's one thing to deal with, Legion and a few other nasty demons and whatever running around. But here's this guy he's the God of creation. You said it, this violent windstorm came down on the lake. You know what that's like. I don't really, but I can guess. It comes down in this huge storm. It's incredibly dangerous. And all he says is, "It's enough." And then he turns to them and he says, "Where's your faith? Where's your faith?" I mean, whether he's stilling an old faith or whether their fear is, it's just mind-blowing, really.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. It definitely is mind-blowing. And having been in a boat at night in rough water, fishing trips, I can understand their fear. We had a boat motor. These guys don't have a motor. They have oars. They've got little sails. They're really at the mercy of the weather. I wouldn't want to be out on the lake in a storm at all. And these guys know how to read the weather, I'm sure they were afraid.
And they found a boat like the boat they used. They have it in a museum in the vicinity.
That's right.
Of Gerrish. It's quite an open boat, as I saw it that time. So it takes in water quite easily.
Right. Right.
But
There's
this is
also the
also
idea.
happening, I think,
Sorry.
when they are in their first year being a disciple of Rabbi Jesus. So psychologically, they still have to get used to who they are following. And in that sense, I think Mark more emphasizes the drama of the learning process. The fact that all kinds of things happening with this rabbi, and him being a rabbi performing miracles is extraordinary. He's not just a Torah teacher. It's quite an impact for a disciple, I can imagine.
There is also an agreement between Luke and Matthew here that I noticed today. I'm probably not the first guy that notices, but both Luke and Matthew do say that these fishermen disciples, they do marvel. They marveled at this event. Mark leaves that word out for some reason. Anyway, it's just kind of curious that both Luke and Matthew would pick up on this marveling.
Yeah.
I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit.
But just before you do, just remember that Yeshua was asleep.
Yeah,
It's not as though he was in the boat and they were all in a panic. He's sleeping through it, and they have to scream at him to wake him up, like you said. And then it's just a rebuke.
right.
There's so much there. I mean, you've just said you wouldn't want to be on a boat. You certainly wouldn't be on asleep in the middle of the Guinesseries.
No, I would not be able to sleep.
No, I don't think so.
Kind of tossing and turning, waves and so forth. We're moving ahead because I'm actually supposed to finish this next segment too, and I don't know how much time we have, but the demoniac, these two stories really seem to go together. I think chronology is right, and the themes work together really well also, especially in Mark. So Luke 8:26 and onward, they arrived. I'm just reading from Kurt Allen now, just to save time. They arrived on the other side of the sea to the country of the Gergesenes. And when they came out of the boat, there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. Sorry, I'm reading from Mark. I should read from Luke. And he stepped out on land there and met him, a man from the city who had demons. For a long time, he had worn no clothes, and he lived not in the house, but among the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried and fell down before him and said with a loud voice, what have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beseech you, do not torment me. For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For many a time it had seized him, and he was kept under guard and bound with chains and fetters. But he broke the bonds and was driven by the demon into the wildernesses, Eremos, desert, Eremos. Jesus then asked him, what is your name? And he said, Legion, for we are many demons. And they begged him not to command them to depart into the abyss, into the depths. Now a large herd of pigs was feeding there on a nearby hillside, and they begged him to let them enter these. So he gave them permission, and the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. When the herdsmen saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. Then the people went out to see what had happened. They came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had gone, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who had seen it told them how he had been possessed with demons and was healed. Then all the people of the surrounding country of the Gergesenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear. So he got into the boat and returned. The man from whom the demons had gone begged that he might join with him, but he sent him away, saying, "Return to your home and declare how much God has done for you." And he went away, proclaiming throughout the whole city how much Jesus had done for him. Now, that's Luke's account of this story. By the time you get to Mark, there's other details, actually quite a few extra details. So I'm gonna highlight some of the details and give you an idea. Mark has 323 words to Luke's 292, if you're counting these two stories. Mark has the whole setting starting when evening came, then they have the calming of the storm in the middle of the night, and then they arrive at the other side. So Luke, it's just some day, it's just one of those days that they sail out. And then it almost seems like a whole separate story that they get to the other side and they're met with this man full of demons. So what I noticed, and I'm just going to deal with a few things here. I noticed, number one, the Greek in Mark, that nobody could bind him. All right. Luke says he was under guard and bound with chains, but Mark says nobody could bind him, and he uses the word idunato. It's from dynamo, power, strength. No one was strong enough to bind him, and no one had strength to subdue him. This is verse 4. So Mark 5, verse 4. No one had strength to subdue him. And I noticed these two words that you have dynamis, dynamic, dynamo, edinato, from dynamo, and you have ischin from ischis. Can't say that very well. Well, it's really interesting, these two words. In the book of Exodus, and I was going to bring up Exodus in context of these two stories, because there's a lot of Exodus language. And this is one place where I noticed it, where Mark has two words that you find in Exodus. Actually, both of these are in Exodus 15. So Mark 5, verse 3 and 4. No one had been able to, had the dynamo, had the power, and they also didn't have the power to subdue him, which is a different word, isichin. So in Exodus 15, verses 6 and 13, the power, in Greek, dynamis, of Pharaoh is destroyed, and the power of God, ischis, is glorified. It's only in Mark, and there happen to be these same two words in the book of Exodus that just lunged out at me, so to speak. In Mark also, we have the pigs who have been grazing, they run away, ephigon. And in Exodus 14:27, the Egyptians also ran, ephigon, or at least they tried to run away, and they're swept into the Reed Sea and they drown. So there's little parallels of language that we start to see in Mark. Perhaps another couple. The people, once they've seen all this event, they're afraid, and they begin to plead with Jesus to leave their region. Apelthen apoton orion, their area. In Exodus, chapter 12 and also Exodus 15, we have a recount of the Egyptians being very
Where
afraid.
were you, before you go on, where were you in Mark with the verse?
I was in Mark 5:14 and then Mark 5:15.
Sorry.
By the way, Yoni,
Yeah.
I'm just posting a link to your article at Jerusalem Cornerstone Foundation
Oh, right, right.
that you wrote on that. A lot of your examples you're giving now with Mark and Exodus are in there.
Yeah, actually, I don't know if I covered all of these in that article.
But some
And
of
the truth, I'm not even sure how far to go. It could be a case of parallelism. I may have gone over the top with this. I started seeing Exodus every time I picked up the Gospel of Mark. For the first 9 chapters, all I could see was Exodus. I might have gone too far. After the 10 plagues, after the 10 hits, the Mokot, that God hits the Egyptians, he hits their economy, he hits their religions, he hits their whole religious infrastructure. And after the 10 plagues, after the death of the firstborn and so forth, the Egyptians tell the Israelites to please leave our region. And that's Exodus 12:33. Please leave our region. And I'm kind of hearing the same, almost the same words. To leave our region. The people that have seen this demoniac delivered and in his right mind, they also want Jesus to leave. It's very interesting, similar language. And this I'm probably out on thin ice at this point, but some of the religion of the Decapolis does involve, well, there's a lot of paganism over there. There's a lot of Gentiles, not all Gentiles, but on the menu, if you're a Greek or a Roman, pigs are usually number 1 for sacrificing and, for barbecues, because they're better than lamb, but you didn't hear me say that. And some of the religion of the Decapolis could have just taken a hit from the God of Israel and please leave our region. These pigs, these potentially sacrificial pigs, go into the lake and they drown. So you've got people in kind of a state of shock and fear. They've just seen something remarkable, but they're also upset because maybe it's a religious thing that just got hit. So Luke doesn't have exactly the same wording. So I guess I'm focusing more on Mark at this moment, that there's these parallels to the book of Exodus. Now, if I back up just a little bit to the calming of the storm, in the midst of that storm, and Gemma, you were talking about it, Jesus basically says, according to Mark, he says, Siopa pefimiso, pefimoso, Siopa pefimoso, peace be still, right? It's not in Luke, it's not in Matthew, it's only in Mark, where Jesus says, peace be still, calm down, really calm down. He says that to the storm, the waves, the tempest on the lake. So with everything I've just said in mind, I just want you to listen a little bit. I'm going to read just some random verses from the book of Exodus, and I'm reading from chapter 14. So now I have to switch glasses because of the time of day. I can no longer see after 8 p.m. Exodus 14, we've got the Israelites. They've just been released from bondage. They're out. I'm sure there's jubilation. They get to Migdal on the sea. They're at this camp. Suddenly, they realize, well, darkness is falling. and they realize that Pharaoh is hot on their heels. He's approaching with his chariots, hundreds of chariots, and they go into a terrible state of fear. And, so Exodus 14:10, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid, stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Tacharishun. Peace, be still. Quiet, be still. There it is on the lips of Moses, almost identical. If you look at the Greek, sigao and siopao and sigao are almost identical. They even sound similar. They have almost identical spelling. So peace, be still, tacharishun in Hebrew, be muted. Wow, there it is. Moses, Jesus, both are saying basically the same thing at a very critical moment. Darkness, a storm, an army, they're in peril. The disciples, and Mark even has other boats. There's a lot of people out here in peril. It's not just a few disciples in one boat. There's other boats. I'm going to skip ahead a bit. I'm still in Exodus 14, but verse 27, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak, the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing towards it, and the Lord swept them into the sea, and they all died, right? At daybreak. So Exodus 14, all of Pharaoh's chariots and horses and all that, they all die in this sea. So now we go back to the Gospels here. We go back to...
But hey, before you go on, because
Yes.
then it goes on, basically Moses then stretches out his hand. He does the same thing almost. This is not, he just puts out his hand and the sea goes back to normal. Verse 27.
Right, absolutely. It goes back to normal.
So it's a little bit like the same as Yeshua putting out his hand and
Yeah.
it all goes back to normal in this crisis.
Right.
It's
And
not quite the same, but it's very close. I love it.
it's very, very similar.
Yeah.
I realize, and this would be a very productive comparison. You can compare the language of this story with Mark and the book of Jonah. This would be Gary's forte, where you have both Jesus and Jonah were in a boat. The description of the storm are almost identical. Both Jesus and Jonah were asleep. Oh my goodness, that's incredible. In both stories, the sailors wake up the sleeper and say, we're going to die. All right, it's amazing. In both cases, there was divine intervention and the sea was calmed. In both cases, the sailors become even more terrified than they were before the storm. Especially in Mark's gospel, they're incredibly afraid even after there's calm restored. So Mark really is, like Bob Lindsay said once upon a time, that Mark is a master with words. He's got us kind of leapfrogging into the book of Jonah and the book of Exodus. We've got all these things now, whereas Luke's story, to me, is just the basic story. It's the basic facts. So if you want to know, the basic facts, you'd probably turn to Luke. If you want to know the potential links and where you can go in the rest of Scripture, well, then you're gonna follow Mark a little more closely. It's a fascinating thing how two people can have such diverse views, and yet they're telling the same story. It's like if Danny preaches, or if I preach, That's not going to happen, right?
So Yoni, we got about 5 more minutes left.
All right. So I'm taking you back to the demoniac, because
In
both
Luke? You're
both
back in Luke
Mark
now.
and Luke. So I'm back in Luke 8. I'm in Mark 5. When Jesus asks the demoniac, "What is your name?" and he said, "My name is Legion," or Legion for we are many demons. I'm conflating both Mark and Luke together. The word legion, it just, it floors me, because first of all, it's not Greek and it's not Hebrew. It's Latin. Here's another borrowed word, and it's a big, important word. It represents Rome in my mind. Suddenly Rome is a part of this. Roman military, a legion, 5,000-6,000 men. I don't know, I stopped and thought about that quite a bit today. Legion, legion. Wow, that's a powerful thing to say. I'm sure there's other ways to describe, sort of military in Greek, but we've got this Roman word, we've got this Latin word. And I know there's oodles of commentary, but I would say this one kind of halted me today when I was thinking about this. It stopped me in my tracks. And I'm going to go ahead and just make some concluding statements. I don't know how much time I have, Gary.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. You all know about the 10th Legion. Actually, there are two 10th Legions. One was called the Equestrian group. They were the horsemen, and that one got phased out. So they didn't exist at this time. But the 10th Legion, called the Fretensis, does exist, and they are in this country from about the time of Archelaus. So around 6 AD, the 10th Legion is already in this country. They've come in through Syria. Fretensis, you kind of hear the word brotherhood in there, but it also might represent sea straits. They used to guard the Straits of Messina over closer to Italy. And they're in this country. One of their symbols is the wild boar, also the bull, but the wild boar is the one that you probably see the most in their minted coins or their stamped roofing tiles that they were making. The wild boar is definitely a symbol of theirs. So this 10th Legion, they've been around. In fact, they were camped at Akko on the coast for several decades. Then they're called into action in 66 AD when the first great revolt, Jewish revolt against Rome happens. That 10th Legion gets called into action. And it's the 10th Legion that helped to destroy Jerusalem, the temple. It's the 10th Legion later on. They're sent down to Masada. You know them. You know lots of stories about them.
And are you saying that a wild boar is a pig?
Well, if you were Jewish,
He's a pig.
in the country at the time,
He's a
and
pig.
you've been living under several harsh overlords. It wasn't pretty under the Greeks, and the pigs were involved there too. In fact, there's a whole revolt, you could say, that involves pagan sacrifice with pigs and so forth. So if you were Jewish and you were living here and you've just been experienced years and years of harsh, harsh political atmosphere, and it penetrates pretty much all aspects of life. You're not really free to wear your own clothes. I started picking up on this demoniac. This demoniac is not able to wear clothes. This demoniac has been in oppression. This demoniac is like ancient Israel, enslaved by the Egyptians. And then this demoniac is suddenly freed of all this oppression. Demonic oppression could represent Egypt. It could represent even Rome. And he's able to wear clothes. That really jumped off the page for me. And what Luke says to him at the very end, he says, return to your home. You'll notice earlier in Luke that this person was not able to live in a house. He could only live in tombs. He had to be chained up. He has no clothes, and he doesn't get to live in a house properly. So when he is healed, he gets to go home to his house, to his city, to his friends. Mark includes friends. And he gets to proclaim what the Lord has done for him. If you were Jewish, this story may resonate on a different level. It may resonate on a political level. The potential is really high for this story to communicate a political victory. Yeah, we're in bondage now, we're enslaved, but the Lord is delivering us. And you can almost imagine, whether you're reading any of the synoptic three, but especially Mark or Luke, at the end of the story, oh, the legion, the pigs, they get destroyed. And this demoniac, whether he's Gentile or Jewish, sort of doesn't matter on the one hand. He gets to go home, be normal, wear clothes. He's delivered. The enemy is gone. There's a little sweetness politically in this story that I think I never really appreciated before today.